welcome. This is Pastor Bob, and this is Ascension Healing Fellowship. This is our service, and for this Sunday, it is the very last Sunday of September. Wow, 2025. So really, that's pretty exciting stuff. But I wanted to get on and just let you know how excited I am that you're here and that you're watching this, because we got something really interesting to start diving into. Starting today, and for the next several Sundays, we're going to talk about something that's really near and dear to my heart. And I call it crazy faith, otherwise known as crazy rest, because faith is simply resting. And I find that we are constantly bombarded by things that don't give us rest. And yet I also find that that's exactly what this teaching that we're going to go over the next few Sundays delivers. But as always, we're going to start with some just meditation, some just breathing in and breathing out. Breathing in and breathing out. And as you do this, after a few rounds of breath, I'm going to read a passage to you. And that's going to be our passage that we're really going to dive into today. And I'll tell you more about that as we breathe in. Mortal men do not see the way Yahweh sees, for mortal men see the appearances. However, Yahweh sees the heart. Yahweh sees the heart, whereas mortal men see the appearance. Wow, that's some powerful stuff there. And that's what we're going to dive into today, as we start talking about a wonderful story in 1 Samuel that is one of those crucial stories of faith and just amazing, amazing characters. To me, the stories that are in the Bible are there to teach us things. It's kind of like the stories of Buddha, like the stories of Gandhi. It's like the stories of any ascended master who was on the journey while they were in the human form. But I want to start talking about some of these stories that are in the Bible that maybe you saw them from a different light, or maybe they just didn't mean as much as maybe I'm going to try to demonstrate to you. And this is a good example. So Samuel was a mystic. And a mystic was someone who was outside the norm. Didn't really fit the box, right? They were the people who brought in the good news. They were the people who shared things that sometimes were kind of uncomfortable. Also called prophets, and Samuel was a prophet, as was John the Baptist, and as were others who were, again, outsiders and people that were on the fringe, let's say. So the reason why that's important to understand is that Samuel had a job to do. And he was given jobs by Yahweh, by God, by the divine. And he went about doing them. That's what prophets do. You know, the prophet is basically the hands and feet of the divine. All right? That's what they are. That's essentially, if I was going to put it in a nutshell, that's the nutshell. So, just to kind of clarify that. And so the job that Samuel was on was to go find the next king of Judea, to find the king, the one that would rule the Jewish people, right? That was his mission. That was his purpose. That was his goal. So he was told to go to this one man's house, and that man was in Bethlehem, and to say, okay, you have many sons, and he saw son after son after, and Yahweh just kept going, nope, not this one. Nope, not this one. But this one's, oh, come on, look at how his size and all of this stuff, and he's just perfect, God. No. Yahweh said no. He meant no. Because man sees the appearance. Man sees the outside. But Yahweh, the divine, sees the heart. And we're going to talk in depth about why that's important. But I want to kind of set the stage for what was going on in this particular passage and why this particular passage is so, so important. Because when we start talking about crazy rest and crazy faith, Samuel had it. And then in this passage in 1 Samuel 16, you can really plainly see it, right? Because he accepted that. In fact, before he went to this town, in the town of Bethlehem, to interview, he goes, oh, no, wait. The current king, the one who isn't really the king, if he hears about this, he's going to kill me. And Yahweh said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And one of the things that I find very, very interesting, because Jesus talked about this as well. Jesus said, don't worry about the men who can take your mortal life. That's nothing. That's nothing. Be concerned about the divine who would make your life miserable because you won't reconnect with your inner divinity. That's the one to be concerned about. Don't worry about what's going to happen to your physical body. Don't worry about, I've had to learn the hard way in a lot of things. And sometimes I keep going back to that same lesson, just like the wash cycle, right? I just heard our washer going off, and I was just thinking, yep. Just like the wash cycle. Sometimes I have to learn the same lesson again and again and again. Anyway, getting back to this. So Samuel was there, and he was interviewing these different sons, and he thought, oh, this is the one. No. He was continually encouraged to find crazy rest in the words of the divine. Continually encouraged to find that crazy rest. And here's the crazy thing. The one son that this man didn't even want to introduce Samuel to was out taking care of the sheep. I'm not sure if you remember this, and if you haven't watched all of my message videos, that's totally cool. But remember this, the ones that were invited to see Jesus' birth, or to be some of the first to actually welcome Jesus into the world, were shepherds. These are the outcasts. These are the ones on the fringe. So when we hear Jesus talking about those on the fringe, he was always inviting everyone to the table. Everyone has a seat at the divine table. Everyone is welcome there. And Jesus never converted anyone. He never said, well, you got to come down and say this prayer, and you got to come down and drink this magic juice and take the pill and drink the Kool-Aid and say all the right words. He never said that. And he never started Christianity. Keep that in mind as well. So that's kind of where we're at. And that's kind of the background to this story. And this is the background to where we're at so far. So my real question to you is, why does this matter? And why are we spending multiple Sundays talking about this? Well, faith or rest is really important if you want to have peace that passes all understanding. In fact, you can't have peace that passes all understanding if your soul is still, kind of up in the air, right? If you're still struggling with appearances, if you're still struggling with money, if you're still struggling with power, if you're still struggling with current events, peace that passes all understanding is going to elude you. Now, can you fall into those things for a bit? Yeah, I do it all the time. I'll fall into those, and then the divine's like, hey, remember me? It happens a lot. Just ask my friends. Ask anyone who knows me for more than about 10 minutes, and they'll tell you. So, why this matters is that mystics, again, are the hands and feet of the divine. They're the ones, the mystic, the one who is following the mystery, because when you understand that it's a mystery, you have to have faith in the idea that you might not know it all. and you're okay with that, all of a sudden you go, oh wow, so everything's really an opinion. Yeah, and my opinion gives me peace. If you've got a different opinion that gives you peace, okay. I mean, I'm not here to correct you. I'm really not. I am kind of here to guide you, and I'll kind of guide you like, I hear people that are very negative. Very, very negative, right? And I ask, well, so what do you watch? What do you listen to? What do you bring into your soul? Because whatever you allow to come in is going to come out in a number of various ways. So, just saying. So, they're the hands and feet of the divine, but they're also an example for us to follow. And here's what I mean. When Samuel was told, go and do this job, and he said, yeah, but this guy wants to kill me. Don't worry about it. Okay. He didn't fight it. He didn't struggle. Now, some people do struggle. Even Jesus struggled the night that he was, arrested. I mean, look at Jonah and the whale. And we're going to talk about some of these different characters and the struggle that they had. But what happened here was Yahweh, the divine, said, take a calf, tell him you're going into Bethlehem to make this sacrifice. And then everybody's going to go, okay, because this is that guy who lives out there in the desert. This is that guy who's kind of different. And he's just making a sacrifice because, and they, overall, back in that day, back in that time period, they had an awareness of mystical things. And see, that's something that we've kind of done away with in our modern world of knowing everything, right? We've done away with the mystery. And I find that to be a sad state of affairs. In fact, I believe that's the crux of the problems that we face in the world today. Well, we know capitalism's right. We know communism's right. We know this, we know that. We know all of this. And here's the thing. You can find evidence to support any idea. You just have to find like-minded people who have like-minded ideas. And they'll show you the evidence. It really happens pretty much every day, doesn't it? People see evidence and they go, oh, okay, that's what we're going to believe today. What if you see different evidence tomorrow? Here's an idea. How about just do this? Just rest in the idea that it's all a mystery. We don't know. Now, if you ask me, do I believe that we're all going to this great light that is perfect love and eternally embracing our soul? Yes, I do. Why? Because that gives me peace that passes all understanding. Like I said, if you're finding your peace elsewhere, then okay, good luck with that. All the best with that. I'm just telling you where my peace is. That's why I'm a pastor, okay? Because I tell people where I find peace. So, mystic is the hands and feet of the divine. The mystic is an example for us to follow, and our final moments are going to be embracing the mystery. Now, hopefully it's before our final moments, because if the first time we embrace the mystery is in our passing and in our physical determination, our physical death, it's going to be a struggle, right, in that moment. But if we've already embraced the mystery, and if we've seen the divine as perfect love, okay, it's really not that bad. It's really not that bad. My dad, he passed when I was 11 years old. But my dad used to tell me, Bob, and I thought he was going to live. I just kept being fed the idea that he was going to make it. The cancer wasn't going to get him. But he kept telling me this. He said, death is just another great adventure. And in an odd way, I'm looking forward to more adventure. Think about that. Consider that. Death is just another great adventure. Takes a lot of faith. Takes a lot of resting. Takes a lot of moments of believing. And it takes a lot of gumption. So, just putting that out there. So, what are the most important things to get from today? And I want to go over these one by one. To me, the most important things we can get from this, which really set the stage for what we're going to be diving into with the resting, because next week gets really interesting. We get into some stories that I guarantee you, if you really focus and you really pay attention and really follow, these stories will bless you. I promise you, they will bless you. But the most important things to remember is that the heart as stated here, the heart as stated in what Yahweh sees. Remember, the passage was, man sees only the outer appearance, but Yahweh sees the heart. The heart is the character. The heart is the soul. The heart is what will motivate a person to do what needs to be done. That's what the heart is. That's what the heart symbolizes. And why is that important? Oh man. Listen, that's important because when you get the wrong person into the wrong place, that can be a very challenging thing. Do I believe the divine's in charge of all things? Yes, absolutely. So how does the wrong person get into the wrong place? I believe the wrong person is sometimes allowed into the wrong place because we need to see something with a bigger reality. And we saw that in Nazi Germany. We're seeing that from the CCP in China. We're seeing that we saw that from King Leopold in the Congo. That's how the wrong person gets into the wrong place, because all that is divine. So rest in believing the divine is in all things, and all things are in the divine. So, a second reason this matters, a second reason that this is important, is that we need to understand faith in what? What do we have faith in? And in the last few days, I have heard so much about faith in particular political parties, or faith in ideas, or faith in our military, or faith in our flag, and faith in capitalism, and faith in all of this stuff that just doesn't matter. Let me stress this. Jesus was never political. He was never monetarily wealthy. He wasn't about prestige. He didn't care about what people thought of him. None of that mattered. Yet those were the ways that he was tempted in the desert. And he was also tempted to forget his inner divinity. I've stated this before and I'll state it again. Those things matter because that was not what the divine was about. Not when the divine was here in human form. The heart directs the person. Another reason that this is so vitally important is that the heart directs the person, the character, what drives them. At times in my life, my character was all about making more money. Make hay while the sun shines. And these were religious people telling me, oh, make hay while the sun shines. And all of this type of stuff. Well, you need security. And these were religious people telling me this. But then again, in the time of Christ, religious people would say, well, you got to give more alms to the church. You've got to pay for your you've got to sacrifice a goat. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do the other thing. You got to do. Yeah, I call that the doo-doo religion. But that's what was there. That's what was on the plate. And oh, by the way, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this thing. Because if you do, oh man, then you got to be stoned. Like the woman who was thrown in front of Jesus. Or, you've got to be crucified, or you've got to be this, or you've got to be that. You've got to face punishment. So, I hope this blessed you. I hope you got a lot out of it. Bottom line is this. Man sees with the outer appearance. The divine sees the heart. And here's a little secret to really get you going for this week. There are no labels on the heart. Jesus never saw the label. Why? Because Jesus saw the heart. Jesus saw the heart. That's why the Roman centurion really got his message. That's why the Roman centurion was praised above all others for really understanding Jesus' message. Isn't that interesting? So, I hope you'll think on these things, and I hope this week that you'll examine your heart and think on what your motivation is for healing and for moving forward. And I hope you know that at Ascension Healing Fellowship, we're always here to talk about different healing modalities, to help you move through healing, and to help you find healing in all its beautiful forms. Love you guys. We'll chat soon.